Week 1 of the fantasy football season is in the books, but it's never too soon to make a trade that can help your fantasy team the rest of the season. I got 5 players I think you need to go buy low on right now. And stick around till the end of the video because I have 3 more players I think you're going to want to keep your eye on this week that I think might struggle again in week 2 and will present great buy low opportunities heading into week 3. Now, I'm not just going to talk about each player and tell you why I think they're a buy low. I mean, I'm definitely going to do that, but I'm also going to show you guys that are being valued similarly to the players I'm saying are a buy low. And I'm using the site fantasycalc.com. It's totally free, but they look at almost 3 million trades made across multiple fantasy sites to accurately get a feel for how players are being valued right now, which players are being traded for which players to find out who's being valued similarly. So I'm going to take a look at the players being valued similarly to my buy low candidate and tell you which ones I'd be willing to give up to get the player. And before we get to those players, if you haven't tried Underdog Fantasy, this is a great time. Go get those pick'ems in for week 2. They are live right now. And not only are they giving all customers a CeeDee Lamb special this week, he only needs to go higher than half a yard. If you're new to Underdog, they're also going to give you a Caleb Williams new customer special. He also just needs to go over half a yard. You pair either of those picks with any other picks you like. That's an easy way to get a win in the bag right away. Just make sure if you are joining Underdog for the first time, you sign up using promo code ENDGAME because you're going to get that new customer special with Caleb Williams. Plus, you're going to get a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. My first buy low, and maybe my favorite buy low heading into week 2, is Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. It's easy to look and say, well, look, I mean, Nico was great. Diggs scored 2 touchdowns. Dell didn't really do anything. I guess he's the wide receiver 3, but I would argue he might be the wide receiver 1 or at least the wide receiver 1B because you look at it in week 1, 7 targets, same as Nico Collins, more than Stephon Diggs. 105 air yards, only 7 less than Nico Collins and almost 100 more than Stephon Diggs somehow. And then you might be saying, okay, that's fine and everything, but what about touchdowns? Well, okay, Stephon Diggs, sure, he had the 2 touchdowns. He had an end zone target, but you know who had the only other end zone targets for the Texans? Tank Dell. You know who had the only other red zone targets for the Texans? Tank Dell. He was used so great in this game. He could have had a huge game in week 1. It just didn't happen for him, but it's going to happen. His usage is significantly better than Stephon Diggs. I'd argue it's probably better than Nico Collins' usage. Now, it's only a 1-game sample, but we saw last year, CJ Stroud loves Tank Dell. I think Tank Dell is going to be great starting right here in week 2 and the rest of the season. I put him on the Booms video for a reason, so try to go out and get Tank Dell now before he goes off in week 2. And when we look on Fantasy Calc here, you see he's ranked about 77 among all players in redraft leagues. When we look at players ranked higher than him, I mean, I would trade Keenan Allen for Tank Dell, DeAndre Swift. I would trade Tony Pollard if I was good at running back. Probably not Amari Cooper. Calvin Ridley, I would do it. I mean, if anybody's trading Raheem Mostert for Tank Dell right now, I mean, definitely do that. And then we look at players even maybe a little bit below him who are kind of rising because we see Tank Dell is falling here. Yeah, I would trade Brian Thomas Jr. for Tank Dell. I would trade Xavier Worthy for Tank Dell. I know they had nice games, but they're rookies. I believe in Tank Dell more. I would trade Christian Kirk, Najee Harris. Any of those guys for Tank Dell would be great. So go out, try to get Tank Dell while you can right now. And you should also try to go out and get Brandon Aiyuk right now if you can. Look, we said all week, I was like, don't start Brandon Aiyuk. He's coming back from, that lengthy holdout. He's going to get the sauce treatment. And he did, but look, it should have been a better game. He dropped what should have been a touchdown for sure. He played 75% of the routes, which is, okay. We're going to see that number go up. The rust is going to be off now. He's not going to face Sauce Gardner again. And this week, we could see the real Brandon Aiyuk because they get a matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, which, no, they're not a complete pushover on defense, but don't let what they did in week 1 against Daniel Jones fool you into thinking they're a very good defense. It's going to be a different story this week against the 49ers. And look, if Christian McCaffrey remains out and they continue to use Debo in the backfield, that's just going to open up more for Brandon Aiyuk. So I think from this week till the rest of the season, we see Brandon Aiyuk as a stud wide receiver the way he was being valued earlier in the offseason before all this holdout nonsense. When we look at Brandon Aiyuk on Fantasy Calc, ranked at 33 right now, so still ranked fairly highly, but I mean, he's behind his teammate Deebo Samuel. I still prefer Brandon Aiyuk rest of the season. I would probably be willing to give up Joe Mixon if you're really deep at running back. I mean, obviously, if you need Joe Mixon, keep him there. And look, I'm going to tell you, I would give up Marvin Harrison Jr. for Brandon Aiyuk. I know he was drafted earlier, but look, Brandon Aiyuk, we know, is a good player in the NFL. We're not sure about Marvin Harrison Jr. yet. And when we look at other players behind him being valued similarly, again, Diggs coming off that 2-touchdown game, I think he's a great sell high. Again, if you're solid at running back, I would be willing to move Alvin Kamara. I would definitely move Devontae Adams for him. So again, any of those guys, I'd be willing to trade to go out and get Brandon Aiyuk now before he explodes in week 2 and people remember that this guy is an elite wide receiver. All right, not a lot of buy low running backs this week because it was a great week for running backs, but one guy I think is still being undervalued that I really like is Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders. Clearly the lead back here. My worry going into week 1 was like, man, this offensive line isn't very good. They're facing this, relatively tough Patriots defense, but he looked great. But more importantly to me is 3 catches for 49 yards. Now, look, he's not going to turn 3 catches into 49 yards every single week. That's a ridiculous yards per reception. But if he's going to get a handful of catches every single game, that is just going to make his fantasy value go up so much. And this offense, it's going to get better as the year progresses. And right now, people are very scared of this offense. They're like, it's Jaden Daniels or bust in this offense. I think this is a great time to go out and get Brian Robinson Jr., not to mention he gets the Giants this week, so he could have a very good week 2 performance, and then it'll be too late to go get him. So when we look at Brian Robinson here on Fantasy Calc, ranked at number 82 among all redraft players. Looking at players ranked ahead of him, I would definitely trade Christian Kirk for him if I needed a running back. Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, already talked about them. Not Tank Dell. We're going to go buy low on Tank Dell. We're not trading him away to get a running back. Keenan Allen, yes, I would do that. DeAndre Swift, if someone values DeAndre Swift higher, which is really surprising to me. Looking at players below him, Najee Harris, yes, I think Brian Robinson will be better. Najee Harris was fine in week 1, but I don't really know what the upside is there. J.K. Dobbins, I know everybody thinks he's going to be a league winner, but I mean, he's still not 100%. I'd be willing to move him as well. And going a little bit lower, Jerome Ford, Lamb McConkey, would definitely be willing to trade those guys. And like I said, I think in this week, Brian Robinson's going to have a very big game again. And then people are going to realize, oh, wait a minute, I have a really good running back. So go out and get him now. And after watching the Browns play the Cowboys, I was terrified for Amari Cooper until I dove into it a little bit more. And I noticed like, wow, this guy got incredible usage in week 1. He led all wide receivers in air yards, and he dropped what honestly should have been a touchdown in this game. If he catches that touchdown, we're thinking about him totally differently today. And also, Deshaun Watson was pressured so much in this game. And when you look at it last year, Deshaun Watson was miles better when he wasn't pressured versus when he was. And he also targeted Amari Cooper at a significantly higher rate when he wasn't pressured versus when he was. Jacksonville, for being an underrated defense, did not get a lot of pressure on Tua in week 1. I think Deshaun Watson is going to be able to sit back in the pocket, wait for those routes of Amari Cooper to develop. And I think Amari Cooper is going to have a big bounce back in week 2. And I still like this guy. He still has tons of upside. So go out and get him now before that happens. And then we look here, you see he's ranked at player number 69 right now. We look at players ranked above him. I mean, if Caleb Williams is your QB2, just give me Amari Cooper or somebody who's willing to get Caleb Williams. I would happily take him over Calvin Ridley. Raheem Mostert, again, if somebody's willing to take Raheem Mostert for Cooper, do it. I don't know if that's really going to happen, but I'd prefer Cooper over him there. And then when we look at players valued below him, again, if you're good at running back, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift, I would happily take Cooper over those guys. Keenan Allen, I'd take Cooper over him as well. So again, go out, try to get Cooper now before he has a big week 2 and the buy low window closes. And then my final buy low is going to be Hollywood Brown. I think you got to go out and try to get him now. There's a chance he could play in week 2, but if not, probably going to see this guy in week 3. So you want to go out and get him now before people realize, oh, he's back, and then the buy low window closes here. And look, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Xavier Worthy, he was so good in week 1, but he only had a 14% target share, and most of the routes he ran were just go routes. And I think that's going to be his role, right? Take the top off the defense. Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, they're going to be the guys that are running more of those routes where they get targeted more often. So I think Hollywood Brown coming back from injury, potentially going to have him this week and probably next week at the latest. I think this is a great time to go out and get him before he comes back, has a nice game, and people are like, oh wait, no, I drafted this guy for a reason. And especially when you look at him here on Fantasy Calc, player 131, like really, like he's just free basically. Like just go get him for free. I mean, Josh Palmer, Deshaun Watson, if he's your QB2 in a single QB. TJ Hawkinson, we're not going to see this guy till mid-season. Chase Brown, I mean, Tyler Lockett. I'd happily take Hollywood over all these guys. If Romeo Dobbs, just give me Hollywood. Dalton Schultz, Jacoby Myers, just give me Hollywood over all these guys. He's basically free in your fantasy leagues right now. So this is the time. Go out and get Hollywood Brown. Now, I did also tell you I would give you 3 names that I think are great buy low candidates, but not quite yet because I think they may struggle again this week. But going into week 3, you're probably going to see these guys on that video. Let's start with DK Metcalf. Did not have a great week 1, and I worry he may not have a great week 2 either because now he's going to get Christian Gonzalez. He was great last week, that cornerback for the Patriots. He was very good last week. I think he's going to maybe not lock down DK Metcalf necessarily, but I think he's going to hold DK Metcalf to just a mediocre game again, and people are going to really start getting nervous going into next week. So keep him on your radar as a buy low going into week 3. Also, keep Javonte Williams on your radar as a buy low going into week 3. Look, he is just better than the other running backs in this backfield. He just is, and I think at some point he's going to start to get more carries and he's going to start to get better. Don't give up on this guy already, but also don't start him this week because it's a very tough matchup against that Steelers defense. I don't expect Javonte Williams to do anything this week. And after this week, if he does nothing again, I mean, he might get dropped in your league, to be honest. But if not, he's going to be an easy buy low going into week 3. I do think Javonte Williams eventually will get rolling and will get going. And I think at some point the Broncos are just going to say, fine, give this guy the ball more than all the other running backs. And then at tight end, I think Evan Ingram is going to be a great buy low heading into week 3. I still believe in this guy long term this season. Had a rough week 1, and now it's probably not going to get any better in week 2 because he's got to face the Browns, which have historically been one of the best defenses against tight ends. But look, all that's going to do is make Evan Ingram a better buy low opportunity because people are going to be freaking out, thinking he's going to be a total bust after 2 games. So keep him on your radar if you're looking for tight end, and a lot of us are right now. Keep Evan Ingram on your radar. I mean, you can go try to trade for him now if you want, but I think his value is going to be even lower after this week. There's my 5 favorite buy lows heading into week 2, plus 3 more guys I think you should keep your eye on to see what they do here in week 2. But look, you need more help than that. We got you covered. We got start sits, booms, waivers, everything you need to win in week 2. You can find it in our playlist right here.